The strangest thing about Damascus when you first arrive is how normal everything seems. The call to prayer ringing out from the minarets, the busy bus station, the calm courtyards. There's no curfew here. Residents are free to go about their shopping at the city's old market, albeit under the watchful eye of the president. But some things have changed.
I'm a gentleman's tailor by profession.
Do you do army uniforms?
No, civilian clothes. But lately I've mainly been adjusting uniforms, like this one. It's a large, and I have to turn it into a small for one soldier.
With 20 or so jackets to cut every week, Rashid still has work. He's lucky. Most traders here lost their core customers when tourists stopped coming to Damascus. But in regime-controlled territory, no one complains. There's a war on, after all, and it's not far away. We're barely 3 kilometers from the front line. This is Daraya, a little outside Damascus. Last year, this town saw fierce fighting. Assad's army was accused of committing war crimes here in 2012 after the bodies of 330 civilians were found. These men don't want to talk about that. They've brought us here to meet a very specific unit, Assad's female snipers. Riham is 21.
The rebels usually hide behind the concrete facades. It's hard to aim right when we can't see them, but when I was in Jobar, I took down quite a few. I don't know how many exactly. Our mission is to destroy armed groups. We don't have time to count the bodies.
There are nearly 2,000 female snipers in the brigade, fighting on 6 fronts across Syria. They all signed up voluntarily.
In the beginning, my parents were against me joining the army, but later they encouraged me. When the war is over, I'll go back to a normal life. I would like to start a family and carry on defending my country and instilling patriotism in my children.
Professional, patriotic, sometimes even elegant, these young soldiers personify the regime's opposition to the Islamists and their quasi-medieval outlook. Showing women as the equals of male soldiers is also good for propaganda, of course. That's why we're here. As Russian operations continue, Damascus is cultivating an image of Syrians united in their struggle against terrorism and happy to see Putin's fighter jets up above.
Morale couldn't be higher. If I could, I would hug those Russian Sukhois and MiGs that are bombing our enemies.
They prefer not to mention the fact that these Russian airstrikes are also killing civilians, more than 200 so far. Millions have fled the fighting in Syria. We asked if we could visit a refugee camp, and the authorities agreed. So we headed towards the northern part of the zone shown in red on this map. Damascus, Latakia, Homs, all now in regime hands. It's the part of Syria where Assad's rule still functions. We arrive in Latakia, the Assad clan's heartland, one of the safest regions in the country and home now to more than 1.5 million internally displaced persons. 6,000 of them live in this camp. We're taken around by a military escort, including a colonel.
طلعوا لي الاولاد كلها لبرا كلها لبرا يلا طلعوا لبرا.
We had heard about a safe place in Latakia for us refugees. We're from Harim. We lost our house in the bombing. So first, we all fled to Idlib. But terrorists attacked there too, so we had to leave.
She leaves it at that, perhaps intimidated by the soldiers just outside her tent, which she shares with some 20 family members. No one complains about living conditions here.
I arrived here with 3 children. The 4th one was born here. I've received a lot of help here, and they gave me nappies and milk. It's a lot because these things are very expensive. I think that all the Syrians who left for Turkey or Europe made a mistake. In this camp, we live just as well as back home in Aleppo. We have all we need without leaving the country.
Both Baksa and the people running the camp dismiss those who fled as weak or even as traitors. Back with the colonel, we're taken to see the camp's kitchens. And then we're taken to its little school. It's not a school day when we visit, but the head teacher is there to meet us. The colonel briefs him on the interview he's about to give.
Yes?
You have to say all that was done on the direct orders of His Excellency the President of the Syrian Republic. And you, translator, you be sure to tell the journalist it was the President who insisted on continuing the children's education. All clear?
Yes, we can do it. Okay.
Everything has been done according to the President's instructions. The school is a gift from His Excellency to protect the children and continue their education.
Our next stop is Kardaha, birthplace of Bashar al-Assad's father, Hafez. Most people here are followers of the Alawite branch of Shia Islam, just like the president. This is the only part of Syria where Alawites are in the majority. And this is where Fatima and her 2 nieces found refuge. They have been guests at the home of their relations here since leaving Adra, a town 20 kilometers from Damascus, which fell to rebels from the al-Nusra Front 2 years ago.
They started going after the Druzes, the Alawites and the Christians. They had lists with names and addresses of all the houses where such people lived.
That was the start of what the regime calls the Adra religious massacre, the execution and decapitation of around 100 civilians by the jihadis. Fatima and her husband were saved by their Sunni neighbors, who hid them and even got them false papers so that they could leave the town.
Just outside the town, we had to pass one last terrorist checkpoint. My neighbor said, "Don't look at them. Lower your eyes and keep walking. Don't look, or you may be recognized."
The couple abandoned everything in their flight, but 2 days later came bad news. Fatima's sister-in-law had been kidnapped, leaving behind 2 daughters. One of them, Sarah, shows me pictures of her mother, one from before Adra was taken, and one sent recently by her captors.
This was sent recently as proof she's alive. She's holding a card with her signature and the date on it in her handwriting. She should have been freed on that day as part of a prisoner exchange. But for some reason it didn't happen.
Pro-Assad families like this one are also being torn apart by this war, victims of the Islamists. The government says it needs to protect its people from that threat. Indeed, that is the key argument used throughout Damascus's propaganda. We travel next to Homs, once the stronghold of the anti-Assad opposition. The rebels held it until autumn last year, but they were besieged and ultimately abandoned the city. The streets are haunted by the months of fighting. Some people call it Syria's Stalingrad. The old city centre is completely deserted, or almost. We notice flowers on one balcony. They belong to this man, Fawzi. It took him months to get a pass from the army to enter the area. Today, he's the only resident to visit it every day, rebuilding his home.
I've repainted this part. And here are the new windows I'm going to install. And here, I've redone all the tiling.
It's a mammoth task. Just a few months ago, the place looked like this.
This is what the kitchen looked like. That hole was made by a bomb. You know, it's expensive to buy a new house, so it was easier for me to do the work. And also, I wanted to get my home back. I've made a fresh start. I hope others will follow suit.
We leave Fawzi to go to meet a man who is living in Homs in hiding. Mohammed al-Assad is the son of Professor Khaled al-Assad, archaeologist and former keeper of the treasures of Palmyra. Members of the Islamic State group murdered him in August. When Palmyra, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, fell to the Islamists, Khaled al-Assad took part in the rescue of important items. But he was soon captured.
First, he spent 28 days in captivity, during which time he underwent all sorts of torture and interrogations. They believed there was gold in the ancient city, and they wanted to know where it was hidden, but he didn't give in. The terrorist hordes did not hesitate to decapitate him on the public square in Palmyra, in front of a big crowd. Then they hung his head on an electricity pylon in order to scare local residents. Losing our father was a shock for us all. He was a good father, a big brother, and a very good friend.
Mohammed last saw him in May, when they helped evacuate 400 items from Palmyra to Damascus and the National Museum. This museum closed its doors to the public in 2012. The empty rooms somehow seem to echo the devastation we saw in Homs. Everything has been taken away for safekeeping.
The memories of the Baghdad Museum in 2003 were all too fresh in our minds. We didn't want a repeat of what happened in Iraq and elsewhere, so we started here and then cleared all the museums in the country.
Professor Mamoun's students spend their days sorting rescued items. These are from the museum in Deir ez-Zor, which has fallen into the hands of the Islamic State group.
I have three numbers in check object. The number of excavation areas, the number of the museum, and the number which I give it to the object.
There's a lot to be done. More than 30,000 new items need to be catalogued and sometimes restored, such as these 4,000-year-old tablets. The team is most proud of these statues from ancient Palmyra, a real treasure. In all, 35 Syrian museums have been evacuated, their exhibits stowed away in safe places. But Damascus can do nothing to stop looting and illegal digging at archaeological sites.
If all Syrians agree that we need to work together to save our heritage, away from politics, in fact, I think it helps the political situation too. I mean, saving our heritage is a way of striving for peace.
Peace. Professor Mamoun was the only person to say that word during our whole trip. And to look at the young couples in the museum's garden, you could almost believe in it. But for Mamoun and other employees of the regime, peace means Assad staying in power. Many Syrians feel they could never accept that. So while saving these old stones is certainly important, they cannot by themselves reconcile a nation traumatized by 4 years of war and 250,000 deaths.